The alarm started going off at 2:47 a.m. Not in my office, I didn't work there anymore. I was sitting in my new place across town, watching live news feeds on 3 monitors. Smoke was coming from the Arizona data center, thick black smoke that the helicopters were circling around like vultures. The headline scrolling across the bottom read, "Nexus Global Systems suffers catastrophic failure, millions affected, 12 hours. That's how long it took after they fired me for the whole thing to collapse. My phone started ringing. I didn't answer. I knew exactly who it was and what they wanted. They wanted me to come back and fix their mess. But when you spend 18 years building something from nothing and some 28-year-old with an MBA and her grandfather's last name fires you in front of your whole team, you don't just come running back the second they panic. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Cooper Ashford. I'm 52 years old. I spent 8 years in the Navy as a nuclear engineer on submarines, got out, earned a PhD, and built the Colossus architecture from a single server rack in my garage. That was 18 years ago. Today, Colossus powers banks, airlines, hospitals, and half a dozen government agencies. It's not just a data center management system. It's a self-healing predictive network that anticipates problems before they happen. Or it was, until Paige Montgomery decided she knew better. My office at Nexus was my sanctuary. 38th floor, corner spot, clean desk. I kept it simple. Just a monitor showing system diagnostics, a photo of Gunner, my 3-legged rescue dog, and a coffee mug that said, "Measure twice, cut once." The team gave me that mug 5 years back. It meant something. I had an old turntable on the credenza. That morning I was listening to Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues. The man in black helped me think. When things got complicated and I needed to troubleshoot fast, I'd switch to Credence. But design work, technical planning that needed Cash's steady rhythm. On my screen was a cooling system proposal I'd been working on for 6 months. Next generation cryogenic design that would increase our processing density by 250% while cutting cooling energy consumption by 60%. It was elegant, efficient, expensive, yes, but it would save the company millions in the long run and future-proof US for the next decade. Paige Montgomery thought it was a waste of money. I met Paige 3 months after she got promoted to Executive VP of Infrastructure. She was 28, fresh from a Big Four consulting firm, and she was Richard Montgomery's granddaughter, the chairman's favorite. The press release called her hire a bold move toward innovation. What it really was nepotism dressed up in a power suit. She walked into meetings late, carrying this huge coffee mug like it was a personality trait. She spoke entirely in buzzwords. Actionize our competencies. Leverage synergies. Move fast and break things. She never said anything that meant anything. Real. The first warning sign came in a technical briefing about the Arizona facility. Troy Sullivan raised his hand. Troy spent 12 years on nuclear submarines before he got his PhD in thermodynamics. He designed cooling systems that saved Nexus $50 million a year in energy costs. Guy knew his stuff. Paige, he said, the predictive maintenance models for the primary coolant pumps are showing a 68% probability of bearing failure within 60 days. We need to schedule. She cut him off with a wave of her hand, didn't even look at him. Put it in an email. We're focused on the big picture here, the 30,000-foot view. I watched Troy's jaw tighten. He didn't say anything, but I saw it. These small dismissals add up. They're like cracks in concrete, barely visible until suddenly the whole structure fails. The breaking point came at the quarterly budget review. They held it in this glass-walled conference room on the executive floor that everyone called the Prism. I called it the fishbowl. It was where good ideas went to die under fluorescent lights and executive posturing. My team sat on one side of the table. Troy, Iris Romano, who managed our global network topology, Dr. Nadira Patel, our power grid specialist who once rerouted an entire city's electrical supply to keep us online during a blackout, Craig Davies, Laura Bennett, Neil Archer, 6 people who knew more about keeping data centers running than anyone else in the industry. Paige was 15 minutes late. She didn't apologize. Dr. Patel went first, presenting her analysis of power grid vulnerabilities in our European sector. She was halfway through explaining why we needed upgraded phase converters when Paige interrupted. "Can you just dumb it down? Bottom line it for me. Some of us are focused on business, not technical minutia." Technical minutia. Dr. Patel had a PhD from MIT. She was an immigrant who'd worked her way up from nothing. And Paige just dismissed her expertise like it was an inconvenience. The room got quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind where everyone's uncomfortable but nobody wants to be the first to say something. Then it was my turn. I put the cooling system proposal on the main screen. The numbers were solid. 250% increase in processing density. 60% reduction in cooling energy costs. Initial investment of $47 million. Payback period of 3 years. Then $15 million in annual savings after that. Paige didn't even look at the data. She leaned back in her chair and gave me this condescending smile. "Look, Coop," she said, "I get it. You built something impressive back in the day. But this is technical debt. We need to move fast and break things, not build nuclear submarines when we just need air conditioning." Back in the day. I'd updated the system 3 months ago. It was running better than it ever had. "Paige," I said, keeping my voice level, "an off-the-shelf industrial AC unit would cause a thermal cascade failure in 90 seconds. We wouldn't just breach our service agreements with every client we have. We'd physically melt $100 million worth of hardware." I could see some of the other executives shifting in their seats. The marketing VP who'd been smirking earlier wasn't smirking anymore. Paige's face went red. She'd been exposed as someone who didn't understand the basics of what she was supposed to be managing, and she'd been exposed with facts in front of her peers. She pointed at me across the table. Her finger was shaking slightly. "You're done," she said. Her voice was quiet but vicious. "Pack your things." Then she looked at my team. "The rest of you will adapt or you'll be next. This obsession with perfection is costing us money." She thought she was cutting off the head of the snake. She had no idea what she'd just done. There was this beat of stunned silence. Everyone stared at me, waiting to see how I'd react, waiting for me to argue or defend myself or maybe break down. I didn't do any of that. I just looked at her until she looked away first. Then I gave her a small, cold smile. "Thank you for the clarification," I said. I stood up, grabbed my notebook, and walked out. Calm, professional, like I was just heading to another meeting. But as I walked past Iris Romano, our eyes met for maybe half a second. That was all it took. 10 years of working together, of mutual respect, of watching incompetent executives come and go. She gave the tiniest nod. The protocol was active. Back in my office, Johnny Cash was still playing. I didn't touch my computer, didn't delete anything. That would have been sabotage, and I don't work that way. I just packed my personal items. The mug went in my bag first, then Gunner's photo. I took the cash record off the turntable and slid it carefully into its sleeve. These were the things that actually mattered. As I walked toward the exit, something happened that I'll remember for the rest of my life. One by one, my 6 specialists stood up from their desks. Iris closed her laptop. Troy set down his schematics. Dr. Patel unplugged her workstation. Craig, Laura, Neil, all of them stood. They didn't say anything, didn't make a scene. They just placed their security badges on their desks. 6 small plastic rectangles on white surfaces. Then they fell into line behind me. 7 of us walked through that building together. The security guards watched, confused, but they didn't stop us. What could they do? We weren't yelling. We weren't protesting. We were just leaving. Paige Montgomery thought she'd fired one employee. What she'd actually done was unplug the entire system from its power source. That night, we weren't sitting at home feeling sorry for ourselves. We were in a leased office space on the other side of town. It smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. We'd signed the lease 2 years earlier, paid the deposit from a joint account we'd all been contributing to. Call it insurance. I'd always known a day like this might come. Competence threatens insecure people. Always has. Bush was already at a whiteboard, sketching cooling system diagrams. Iris was setting up a secure network. The energy in that room wasn't sadness or fear, it was focus, purpose. We sat on cardboard boxes later that night, sharing takeout and cheap beer. Iris raised her cup. "To Foundation 7 Consulting," she said. We all raised our cups. "To the Foundation," I said. I looked around at the 6 people who'd followed me out. Troy had 3 kids in college. Walking away from his salary was a financial risk. Iris was a single mom with a mortgage. Dr. Patel was an immigrant. I'd sponsored her visa years ago when nobody else would take a chance on her. Craig and Laura both had families depending on them. They'd all walked away anyway, not because I asked them to, because they chose to. That's loyalty you can't buy and can't fake. That's the kind of team you build over 18 years of treating people with respect and trusting their expertise. And that's exactly what Paige had just thrown away. My sources inside Nexus told me what happened the next morning. Paige called an all-hands meeting with what was left of the department, a handful of junior engineers and terrified interns. She announced a strategic partnership with a managed services vendor called Velocity Tech Group. I knew them. They were famous for slick presentations and operational disasters. She stood up there, confident as ever, and introduced this team of kids fresh out of college. Average age maybe 24. They had certifications but zero real-world experience. They were clutching copies of the Colossus Operations Manual, a document I'd written personally to be detailed enough to look comprehensive but useless without the knowledge that lived in 7 heads. 7 heads that just walked out the door. Paige's final words to them were, "Your only job is to keep the lights on." Simple, declarative, completely meaningless when you're dealing with systems this complex. She might as well have told a bunch of kids to perform brain surgery after reading a textbook. The collapse didn't start with a bang. It started with a flicker. Less than 12 hours after we walked out, there was a minor power fluctuation from the Nevada electrical grid. The lights dimmed for maybe half a second. A total non-event. For my team, it would have been an automated alert that cleared itself in seconds. The system would have balanced the load seamlessly. But my team wasn't there anymore. Inside the Nexus Network Operations Center, monitors lit up showing the power dip. The Velocity Tech kids stared at the screens, then they started frantically flipping through the manual, looking for a procedure, a checklist, an answer. The answer wasn't there. What they didn't understand was that Colossus was designed for exactly this scenario, built to protect itself above everything else. In the absence of expert guidance to perform the complex reset protocols, the system's core programming took over. Prime directive: prevent hardware damage. So, exactly as I designed it 18 years ago, the system began a cascading shutdown. Orderly, methodical, catastrophic. Alarms that had been silent for years started blaring. Red lights that only existed in training simulations flashed across the operations board. The Velocity kids just stood there, faces going pale, watching their career-ending disaster unfold in real time. They were pilots in a cockpit where none of the controls responded. The Arizona data center, the flagship of the entire Nexus network, went dark. Not a slowdown, not a degraded service alert, complete blackout. One moment it was processing millions of transactions per second. The next, it was a silent building full of rapidly heating servers. The real-world impact hit fast. An airline's entire booking system vanished. 12,000 passengers stranded in airports worldwide, millions more unable to book flights. A major bank's transaction network froze, halting $320 million per hour in commerce. A streaming service cut out during its season finale premiere, replaced by error messages on millions of screens. By 3 a.m., the news helicopters were circling the Arizona facility. Smoke was pouring from the backup cooling systems that had failed under the load. Some kid at Velocity had tried to manually override the coolant protocols and nearly caused an explosion. Social media went crazy. #NexusFail was trending worldwide. People posting screenshots of error messages, airline passengers recording themselves sleeping on airport floors, bank customers locked out of their accounts. I watched it all from my new office. 3 monitors showing news feeds, social media, and system diagnostics I could still access through back channels. Troy brought coffee around 4 a.m. We didn't say much, just watched. The crisis room at Nexus headquarters was pure chaos. I heard about it later from people still inside. Paige was at the center of it, jacket off, shirt soaked with sweat, tie hanging loose. The calm executive was gone. Now she was just someone panicking and shouting useless orders. "We need to synergize a solution," she yelled at one point. "Think outside the box. What's the action plan?" She was a consultant trying to perform surgery. All the buzzwords in the world couldn't fix what she'd broken. She kept demanding to know why they couldn't just reboot everything. What she couldn't understand was that bringing a hyperscale data center back online from a cold start wasn't like restarting your laptop. It was an intricate, undocumented 143-step sequence. a delicate process of power cycling, network initialization, and load balancing that existed only in 7 minds. 7 minds currently sitting in a different office, drinking coffee and watching her world burn. At 10 a.m., 22 hours after the collapse started, the emergency board call happened. The video grid was full of grim, angry faces. The Nexus board members looked shaken. Richard Montgomery, the chairman and Page's grandfather, looked about 10 years older than he had the day before. Next to them were the clients, CEOs of the banks and airlines currently losing millions per hour. They weren't scared. They were furious. Page was on the main screen, looking small and defeated. She was trying to deflect, blaming unforeseeable circumstances and unprecedented technical challenges. Nobody was buying it. She finally had to say it out loud. "We don't have anyone on staff who knows the cold start sequence. The documentation is incomplete." Silence. Then Diane Rothman spoke. She was the CEO of their biggest client, a major financial institution. Her voice was ice cold. "I don't care about your documentation," she said. "We never had a contract with you, Page. We had a contract with Cooper Ashford's 6 nines uptime. That's what we paid for. That's what you sold us. Get him on this call. Now." It wasn't a request. Richard Montgomery looked at his granddaughter. His face said everything. She'd been his golden child, his bold hire, his vision for the future. Now she was just the person who'd destroyed the company. The board members who'd supported her promotion were silent. They'd placed their bet on nepotism over competence, and they'd lost. There was some frantic scrambling off camera. Then a new window opened on the video grid. My face appeared on the main screen. The contrast was perfect. Paige was in her war room, disheveled and desperate. I was in a clean conference room, calm and professional. Behind me, clearly visible through the glass wall, was our new company logo, Foundation 7 Consulting, and I wasn't alone. My 6 specialists sat on either side of me: Troy, Iris, Dr. Patel, Craig, Laura, Neil, silent, professional. A display of competence that Paige had thrown away. I looked into the camera. I didn't acknowledge Paige at all. I spoke directly to the board. "Nexus doesn't have a technical problem," I said. "It has a personnel problem." I gestured to my team. And as you can see, the personnel are currently otherwise engaged. I watched Paige's face on the monitor, the exact moment she understood what she'd done. Not just fired an employee, not just made a business mistake. She'd picked a fight with someone who held all the cards, and she'd already lost everything. I didn't wait for them to beg. I took control of the conversation. "Here's the solution," I said. I shared my screen. A document appeared. Foundation 7 Consulting, Nexus Restoration and Management Proposal. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a list of terms. "My team will restore the Arizona network and get your systems back online. Our fee for this emergency service is $75 million, wired in advance before we start work." A few of the board members flinched. One opened his mouth to object. Diane Rothman cut him off with a look. "Keep going," she said. "Moving forward, Foundation 7 Consulting will manage Nexus's entire global data center network as your sole independent contractor. My old department budget was $18 million per year. Our annual fee will be $72 million. I paused. Plus that $75 million emergency fee up front, non-negotiable. The numbers were deliberately punitive. 4 times what they'd been paying. It was the price of their stupidity and arrogance. Richard Montgomery looked like he'd aged another 5 years in the last 5 minutes. That's excessive." "No," Diane Rothman said flatly. "That's the market rate for expertise you can't replace. Sign it." The other client CEOs nodded. They were hemorrhaging money every minute this call went on. They didn't care what it cost. They just wanted their systems back. "There's one more clause," I said, scrolling to the bottom of the document. Clause 7B. "All directives, reports, budget approvals, and communications for Foundation 7 Consulting will be channeled exclusively through a single corporate liaison, someone who will hold sole authority to approve our invoices and coordinate all interactions between our companies." I looked directly at Paige for the first time. That liaison will be Executive Vice President of Infrastructure Paige Montgomery. The camera focused on her face. I watched the color drain from it in real time. She understood immediately. She wasn't being fired. That would have been mercy. That would have let her leave with some dignity, maybe find another job somewhere else. This was something much worse. She would keep her title, keep her office, keep her salary, but her actual authority was gone. The woman who'd dismissed experts as overpaid and outdated would now spend her days personally approving seven-figure invoices for the people she'd fired. She'd sit in meetings taking notes while we gave her instructions. She'd coordinate schedules and forward emails and do administrative work. She was being transformed from an executive into a secretary. Her entire professional existence was now a tool for her own daily humiliation, and she couldn't quit. Not after this disaster. Quitting would look like running away from responsibility. She was trapped. The board had no choice, and they knew it. With Diane Rothman and the other clients staring them down, with the company hemorrhaging millions per hour, with their stock price in freefall, they accepted every single term. Richard Montgomery's voice was barely a whisper. Approved. Excellent, I said. We'll start work as soon as the $75 million clears. Wire transfer only. Should take about 4 hours to get critical systems back online once we begin. Full restoration in 48 hours. I ended the call without waiting for a response. Troy looked at me and grinned. 4 times salary. Not bad for a day's work. We earned it, I said. And we had. We spent the next 48 hours working around the clock, remotely accessing the Arizona facility and walking the Velocity Tech kids through the restart sequence step by step. It was like teaching kindergartners to fly a fighter jet, but we got it done. Hour 26. Deal signed, money cleared, we started work. Hour 30. Critical. Banking systems back online. Hour 42. Airline booking systems restored. Hour 48. Full network operational. By the end of the week, Nexus was back to normal operations. Well, normal for everyone except Paige. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office. Really sitting in it this time, not just camping in an empty space. We'd furnished it properly. Clean desks, good equipment, a conference room with our logo on the wall, Foundation 7 Consulting. There was a knock on my door. Paige walked in. She looked smaller somehow. The expensive suit didn't fit quite right anymore. The confidence was completely gone. She was carrying a stack of documents, purchase orders, budget approvals. She set them on my desk without making eye contact. "These need your review and my signature for approval," she said quietly. I picked up the first one. It was the purchase order for the next generation cryogenic cooling system. The exact same proposal she'd mocked 3 weeks ago. The one she'd called unnecessary and wasteful right before she fired me. $47 million. The gold-plated science project she'd rejected. I reviewed it slowly, made a few notes in the margins, then pushed it back across the desk toward her. "Your signature is required for approval," I said. My voice was flat, professional. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the pen. The sound of the nib scratching across the paper was the only sound in the room. She was signing off on the exact project she'd killed, acknowledging in writing that she'd been wrong about everything. She finished signing and stood there for a moment like she wanted to say something. Maybe apologize. Maybe explain. I didn't look up, just pulled the next document toward me. She left without a word. After she was gone, I walked over to my turntable. I'd brought all my records to the new office. I took out the Credence record, Fortunate Son, and placed it on the platter. As the opening guitar riff filled the room, I looked at that signed purchase order on my desk. It wasn't just a business document, it was proof, evidence that competence beats arrogance every single time. 6 months later, things had changed even more. Foundation 7 had picked up 3 additional Fortune 500 clients. Companies that had watched what happened at Nexus and decided they wanted the people who actually knew what they were doing. Our revenue in the first 6 months exceeded what I'd made in 5 years at Nexus. Troy's son came on board, fresh out of college with an engineering degree, but actually willing to learn. I spent a couple hours every week teaching him the things you can't get from textbooks: how to read a system, how to anticipate failures, how to build something that lasts. I started teaching a night class at the community college too. Introduction to Data Center Architecture. Most of the students were older folks looking to change careers, people who'd been told they were too old to learn new things. I knew better. Experience matters. Wisdom matters. One of my students was a 47-year-old former factory supervisor. Smart guy, just needed someone to give him a chance. I hired him as an intern. He's now one of our junior engineers. As for Paige, last I heard, Richard Montgomery quietly moved her to a position in HR. Corporate exile. She's probably pushing papers and approving vacation requests now. I don't think about her much anymore. What I learned that day in the glass conference room when she pointed at me and said I was done was something I already knew from the Navy but had forgotten in the corporate world. Competence doesn't retire. It doesn't fade away just because someone younger and louder shows up. Real expertise, built over years of hard work and learning from mistakes, that's something you can't fake and can't replace. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. They taught me that 25 years ago in the service, and it's still true today. The young hotshots always want to move fast and break things. But the people who actually build things that last, who keep the lights on and the systems running, we measure twice and cut once. We do it right the first time. And when someone makes the mistake of throwing us away, well, they find out pretty quickly what they actually had, usually right around the time everything catches fire. I took a sip of coffee and looked around my office. My team was out there, doing good work, building things that mattered, getting paid what we were actually worth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just being so good at what you do that they can't function without you, and then making them pay for it.